We are live.
Excellent. So I've been having a lot of fun programming with LLMs. Um, it's been really interesting to sort of really understand the nature and the state of the technology. And it's mostly to help with those tiny little.
I know you're talking about large language models. I just lost you.
It's weird.
Uh,
Nothing's changed.
okay, it came back. I have no idea what just occurred. Um,
Weird.
yeah, I don't know.
Um,
Okay.
I got a fly trapped in here with me. Hmm.
I'm so
It's
sorry.
not trapped in here with me. I'm trapped in here with it.
Yes, that is more accurate.
This is not helpful, fly. Like, it's fine if you want to fly around, but if you want to land on my face, this is not going to work out for both of us.
Oh man.
Um,
It's better than
so
a
first,
cricket.
yes, I've had crickets trapped in the house. That is not a good day.
That is the
Um,
worst.
yeah. But yeah, so I've been programming with Claude, which so far feels like the best of the large language models for coding, better than OpenAI. And
Have
it's a
you
really
tried GitHub Copilot?
No. So the way I've been working is I have a project in my code editor,
Hmm.
and then I'm asking it, for making changes in functionality, and it's saying, "Oh, in this file, open up this bit and change this
Okay.
um this class, this function," and we sort of move our way forward bit by bit. But it's kind of amazing, and it sort of brings back all of my skills as a project manager, as a product manager in
Yeah.
developing requirements. Apparently, my audio is delayed, so maybe there's a problem with my internet. Let me do a speed test.
All right, let me
Um,
make sure I don't have any screwed up settings, any ghosts in the system.
no, I've got all the internet. Um,
And I don't see
yeah,
any
and so it's
ghosts.
so it's really interesting to it has a database of all of the words, parse the document based on the words that I've learned and the words that I don't know, and then it also based on how likely they are to appear in the language. And so I can find the words that are most important to learn first, and then other ones after that. And it took me about 4 days to develop, and essentially burning through um I kept, I'd reached the end of what Claude was letting me do. You have to come back at 4, right? Before you can continue working with the app. But in the end, I got something that was incredibly useful, and just by talking to it, which is very different, right? Because, typically the way I would take on one of these projects is I would program it, right? And so you're like, no, you have to use your words. Um, and it's a very interesting experience because you really start to understand the capabilities of the large language when it begins to decouple with reality, when it starts to hallucinate, which things it's more likely to hallucinate and lose track of, ways that you can keep it on track. It's very interesting. It's one thing to just have this kind of mythical sort of feeling about this technology. It's
Mm-hmm.
another thing to like actually have taken all the way through its paces to know where it does and doesn't behave, and how it does and doesn't perform, and what it's good at, what it's bad at, and so on. Yeah, it's a very interesting process. What's nice about it, I think, is that there are all these little bits of glue
Yeah.
that we could always use, and but in many cases the tech stack to get yourself to the point that you could actually create the little piece of glue is just too much of a pain in the butt. So I'll give you an example. Like, so we're bringing back the virtual star parties I've tested out the new telescope. It's phenomenal. I posted some pictures
This is
of
the one in
the.
Texas?
This is the one in Texas, yeah.
Yeah.
So I posted some pictures of the comet on YouTube and on Blue Sky, and it's amazing. Um, and and so, but the problem is that to order to control the telescope, you have to run an emulation of the Celestron app on a
Yeah.
Mac Mini that's local, and then I have to be able to remote into the Mac Mini, load up the app, and then the thing's taking pictures, and then it is saving the pictures in what it thinks is its local memory. But in fact, it's an emulation running on top of a Mac Mini. And so I have to get at those photos. I have to essentially pierce through the emulator, find where the files for that emulator are being stored locally, and get them off of there. And so that's going to require some Apple script. And I don't know how to program Apple script,
Yeah.
right? And so I can just go and ask the large, here's exactly what I need to do, and it'll develop some Apple script. Like, and let's get these over into an FTP server. Let's get these onto an S3 repository, like someplace that's not locked inside an app that is being emulated
Right.
on a Mac Mini that is really far away. I want it on my local computer, right?
Yeah.
If I need to tunnel in, grab them, and get them off. And there's like three different protocols. It's about running Apple scripts that pull them off of the Mac Mini. It's about running a secure pipeline between me and that computer, and it's about having them be organized here. And then the next step is, in fact, while we're doing the star party, I want just provide links into the YouTube chat where people can just, as soon as a picture is done, they can just download the picture and look at it for themselves. And
Yeah.
that'll just keep popping up in the YouTube chat. So that's another thing to bolt in, where I've got to probably somehow run these, create an account that is automatically posting links into the YouTube chat, maybe through an extension or something, right? So four different pieces of technology that I don't have any experience in developing for.
Can I
But
make
you
a
can.
suggestion for the posting the pictures for the public?
Mm, mm-hmm,
There's a really good Flickr uploader, and
mm,
you can point it at a directory on your computer. So
mm,
as images go into it, it automatically sucks them into Flickr.
right. That's great. But then I also want them to be posted into the YouTube chat as they're happening, so
That's
people can
okay.
grab them.
Yeah.
Right? And so before I would just be like, well, that's too bad. Like, that's a great idea, Fraser. Yeah, I'm sure the people who are watching this would love the moment a new picture is done and they're seeing it on screen. There's also a link to the high resolution version, and maybe even a bucket that contains all of the raw
Yeah.
images, so they can stack it and do whatever they want with the
Hmm.
data. But I'd be like, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's one technology too far. And now I'm like, oh yeah, this will be easy. Like, I know exactly how to describe the problem so that ChatGPT or Claude or some combination of the two will help me develop this entire pipeline. And when we're doing the star parties, there will be links in the YouTube chat as we show a new picture in the party. The picture will be there as a JPEG that you can then click in the chat and go and look at the picture, not have to look at it through YouTube. So it's yeah, it's a very interesting way. And so now I start to think about all these automations that I've had in my brain where I'm like, oh, I could make this really easy. I can do this now. Stuff that never had value before. So,
Yeah. So one thing I've run into using GitHub Copilot is it will periodically hallucinate variable names where it has at one
yes.
point come up with it should be this variable name. And then later on, it'll be like, no, no, no,
Yeah.
I've changed my mind. And I can't figure out why everything stopped working. And it's because it changed the variable name.
Yes. I've had this exact experience. And so this is coming from the the conversation is so long that it's starting to lose coherence and it's starting to hallucinate and goes like, what would be a good name for a variable, as opposed to what is the name of the variable? And so I've developed a couple of scripts that, for example, compress all of my code into one chunk that I can then give it to the LLM at the beginning of the conversation, go, here's the code. But then I'm now working on something that will minimize the code. So it'll take every function and create the smallest possible version that it can then losslessly expand again. So it'll explain the function, it'll describe the variables,
Hmm.
right? But it'll be in two lines as opposed to a 40-line chunk of code, right? So
You are so happy. I just want to point out, like, I haven't seen you this excited about
yeah.
programming since you
Yeah,
were
yeah,
a
yeah.
graduate student.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, we focus on the things that we have to focus on. And so
Yeah,
for me, the things that I have to focus on is running a universe today and being a journalist.
right.
I don't have time to scratch the programming itch. And this lets you um, do that in a way that helps you make progress. And the things that we as programmers hate to do, it loves to do, like documentation, right? Like maintain the documentation for this script. Every time you make even the slightest change to the script, update the documentation. And it's like, no problem. Here's the new documentation. No problem. This is fun. I love making documentation. Great. Because I don't. So yeah, yeah. So a lot of that stuff that's absolutely important, or like writing tests, writing unit tests, and just you're like, okay, go through this application and write a unit test for every single one of the functions, exploring edge cases, and
Yeah,
out pop up a whole bunch of unit tests. And then
yeah.
you run the unit tests and you see where they break. And you're like, oh, of course, I, didn't
Well,
account for it being at zero in this function, whatever.
and if you're working in Python and ChatGPT, you can say, run the unit tests and fix the code.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't
So it's
work in
so it's
Python
really
or
interesting.
ChatGPT, so I
Yeah.
just know these things.
And then obviously then we all die. But for until then, it's going to be fun. And
I
then it'll take
kind of
over the future
feel
light cone of the universe.
I kind of
But
feel like large language models are going to do more than any human being to put us on the path to universal uh uh something something income.
oh, universal basic income.
Yeah,
There is
that's what it
no
was.
way the future of humanity looks any way familiar to how it looks today.
Yeah, that's
There's no possible
entirely
way.
true. Yeah.
Like it's either we have some place where humanity's all died because someone messed up their code and the thing is off manufacturing paper clips, or we've we've somehow made it safe and have made a million problems go away. And the things that we do manually are being done automatically. And the future is weird, but at least not lethal.
Well,
And but there is
and
no middle ground. I think most people, they imagine the future is to be kind of like today, but with more technology, whatever that means.
so
And I don't see that.
one of the most surprising lessons that I learned as a professor was not everyone can be anything. There are people who will never be professional astronomers earning their income that
Mhm.
way. There are people who are never going to be professional engineers earning their living that way. There are people who have the personality and the skill set to work in jobs that are getting eliminated by technology, like cashiers here. That's no longer a job a lot of places
Mm.
because of all the self checkouts, and our gas
Yep.
stations have these put everything you're buying on this platform, cameras
Huh.
do the thing, and you don't even have to
Wow.
scan QR
Yeah.
codes. And so the person who's working there literally exists for lotto tickets, cigarettes, and alcohol.
Right.
And
So
that's
when we
it.
were in Amsterdam,
Yeah.
the grocery stores have no cashiers.
Right.
And so like here in Canada, you have cashiers and you have automated checkouts. And I now always use the automated checkout. I'm like, oh, a lot of people complain it. I prefer it. Because I understand the system. But
Unless I'm
but in
buying fruits
Amsterdam,
and vegetables, then I hate them.
even that, I buy the same kinds of things. I remember the codes even. Bananas are 4011. Um, so I and they're quick to look up, but I know what you mean. And so it's very strange to see, like I didn't take out any cash when I was in Europe at all. And a lot of the kinds of transactions that you do, they're all automated. There's no cashiers. And
Right.
they just like they've just completely jumped over to, yeah, we're a cashless society and we don't have cashiers. And so you can have you can have this incredibly
yeah.
tight, small grocery store in Amsterdam that is 1/50th the footprint of what you might see in the US or here in Canada. Like, it's incredible how dense these grocery stores are. Yet they have really good selection, really good prices. Stuff was surprisingly inexpensive in Amsterdam compared to Canada. Like, it was the same price. That, for me, that's surprisingly inexpensive when I'm traveling in Europe.
And
Um, and very efficient.
and so OK 3000 makes a point over in the YouTube chat. I always go to the in-person checkout. Groceries are expensive and stores need to pay people to work there. And that gets back to the idea that there are humans that's like where their skill set is.
Hmm.
And so as we
Hmm.
eliminate all of these cashier positions and replace them with computers,
Yeah.
or asking people to check out with their own groceries, replacing a job with me having to do more work when I go to the grocery store,
Yeah.
what
But
happens?
what if having no cashiers allows grocery stores to not have to raise the prices on their food,
And
which is
this,
better for people who are marginalized, who are having trouble making their budgets work with food prices going up.
but they need a job. So this is where I
Hmm.
really think as we automate more and more, we're going to end up having to have universal basic income, because there are human beings that their skill set is such that everything that they would do
Hmm.
is automatable, and
Yeah.
they are still wonderful human beings. Technology is just getting really advanced.
Yeah, we've done some really interesting experiments. Like, there have been interesting experiments with universal basic
Yeah.
income here in Canada. Um, and there are challenges for sure, but I think it's absolutely a conversation, and the experiments need to be run today to figure out which of these is going to work best and which one is going to lead to problems down the road. And there's no universal panacea, and yet the
Yeah.
technology is charging headlong forward. Anyway, we should do our job. As opposed
All
to a
right.
societal commentary, we should do an
Yeah.
episode on
Neil Gehrels. Both of us in the last episode renamed this human. Rich, our editor, sent me this message, and he's like, "You both said Niels Gehrels instead of Neil singular. We
yeah.
pluralized him. We turned him into Niels Bohr."
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's clearly what it was Niels Bohr.
yeah,
Like, the if you have a Neil, then we will say Niels Bohr always. So, and I wouldn't be surprised if we do it in this episode.
yeah. We're sorry, Rich. I'm just going to
Yeah.
preemptively apologize, and I'm going to realize I opened my software. I forgot to name the file, however. So new audio file. This is 731.
7:31.
All right. I am pressing the record. I
I am
am.
also pressing the record button.
Okay. We are
Okay.
recording.
Astronomy Cast, episode 731, Neil Gehrels. Welcome to Astronomy Cast, our weekly facts-based journey through the cosmos, where we help you understand not only what we know, but how we know what we know. I'm Fraser Cain. I'm the publisher of Universe Today. With me, as always, is Dr. Pamela, a senior scientist for the Planetary Science Institute and the director of CosmoQuest. Hey, Pamela, how you doing?
I am doing well. It is October 21st, which means we are so close to Halloween, and I have
You
all
happy?
of the excite. Do
Yeah.
you get triggered? You live at the end of like
No.
a super
No.
long driveway. You have a
Nope.
sad
We have
life now.
no trick-or-treaters. No. No. And now the kids are out the door and don't do that kind of thing anymore. It used
Yeah.
to be one of us would stay home, handle the trick-or-treaters. The other one of us would take the kids to a denser place where there was a lot more trick-or-treating going on, and they could harvest more candy. But now, no, nobody comes our way. So Halloween is just like oh, it's Halloween. Oh yeah. Huh.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
that's that's tragic. The
Well,
the
it's just a phase in our lives.
I know. See, we have no children, but I live in that neighborhood everyone goes to.
Right.
And the thing I am excited about is so Obama was my senator back when he was elected, so he had a lot of local support. And the year it was that presidential election, a lot of the kids would knock on the door, and instead of trick or treat, they would say, vote for Obama, which was hilarious. And so I'm waiting to see what the kids say this year, because the kids are okay. And this is your reminder, whatever democracy you live in, if you live in a democracy, remember to vote and make sure you're registered if you're in a country that has to happen.
We just voted for our provincial government.
Okay.
So we're waiting for the results this week. We'll find out which party won. So last week we talked about the Neil Gehrels Swift Telescope. This week we'll be talking about the man behind the mission. Gehrels was the principal investigator behind many missions at NASA, including Swift, but that really is just the tip of the iceberg. And we'll talk about it in a second, but it's time for a break. And we're back. So I think before we begin this episode, we need to provide a correction for last week.
We both made the exact same mistake. It was caught by Rich Drum, our audio editor. We both said Niels, like Niels Bohr.
Yes.
And it's Neil, the American version. He's of Dutch ancestry. His father, Thomas Gehrels, was a Dutch astronomer, but came and worked in America. And Neil was raised in America. It is no S. And
we may do it again. And I just want to apologize in advance. Clearly, the Niels Bohr has worn a groove in our brains that it's our instinctual way to describe the word Neil. And apologies to all the Neils out there and the Neils.
Language is hard.
Language is hard. So, who was Neil Gehrels?
He was a American particle physicist focused on astronomy objects. And his entire life was basically astroparticle physics. And what I love is this is your quintessential human being that was exposed to science his entire life and ended up in astronomy, even though he clearly at one point considered hanging a left. So growing up, like I said, his father was an astronomer. He lived for a time at McDonald Observatory while his dad worked there. His dad ended up at the University of Arizona in the department there. So he spent the remainder of his childhood growing up in Tucson. Like so many children of faculty, he went to the university his father worked at because that is how you get free tuition. So he did his undergraduate degree in music and physics at the University of Arizona. He was passionate about music, but somewhere along the lines decided, I'm going to go to graduate school. He got into Caltech, which is like one of the hardest programs to get into. And not only that, but like one of his two graduate advisors was Ed Stone, the person who did the Voyager missions forever and only passed away recently. And one of his graduate programs was actually calibrating the cosmic ray detector on Voyager. So you have this human who's chasing down high energy particles and starting in planetary science for a multi-generational mission, and finishes that. His very first postdoc took him to Goddard, and he never left.
Right. Yeah. There's a bunch of those lifers at Goddard who work on mission after mission after mission. So like I want to talk about some of his early work. Like I know he was instrumental, pardon the pun, in helping to develop balloon-based astronomy.
That was a terrible
And
pun.
then I know, and then worked with other instruments and missions. So So where do you want to start with the kinds of work that he was, and I guess like specifically, like what was his specialty? If he was going to join a mission, what was the thing that he was very good at?
So, I mean, this is the thing that really got me trying to understand what all to talk about in this episode is at the end of the day, he was a big picture thinker who had a strong understanding of instrumentation. And
Hmm.
because of that, he could look at a science problem and say, this is how we should address it. This thing is capable of addressing it. We need to create this other thing to address this
Mm.
problem. And one of the underlying subtexts of everything I was reading was he had really good interpersonal skills. So he ended up leading things because he wouldn't politically screw them up, which really most astronomers would, because we don't have those skills. And
Right. Yeah.
and so here is
Why
this
won't you
person.
listen to me? This is how we should do it. Yeah.
Yeah, he knew how not to do that.
Right.
Yeah. So here you have a human being with really good interpersonal skills, good political savvy, who had the big picture thinking and ability to understand instrumentation to look broadly at things. And he basically started from particles, moved on to gamma rays, which was a very new field of big picture astronomy at that point. And then, like, ultimately, before he passed away of pancreatic cancer, far too young, he was working on W first,
Right.
which is not particles. It is not high
No. No,
energy.
that's infrared. Yeah.
And it was seeing that caused me to go backwards and be like, wait, how does this even happen? And the way it happens is you're a big picture thinker who doesn't tick off everyone around you, and because of that can enable amazing things to occur.
Right.
He died
I
way
mean,
too young.
the
We
so
need people like this.
so W First, its new name is Nancy Grace Roman.
Right.
As you said, and like it makes sense. Like as a particle physicist,
Hmm.
thinking about how can we perceive photons in various wavelengths, mostly gamma rays. They're not visible down here, trapped under the atmosphere. You've got to go to space. But
Hmm.
if you can fly high in a balloon, now you have a chance of being able to see gamma rays or to be able to see the particles that come
Yeah.
off of gamma rays as they strike the Earth's atmosphere, cosmic rays, things like that. And so I think, and then to sort of, as you say, take that through from gamma rays all the way through to infrared. I mean,
And
I guess
he
photons are
also wandered
photons,
into gravitational waves a bit.
right? As they all do. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah. That's really interesting.
and so he started with working on Voyager, and in the coolest, weirdest change of fate I think I have seen in terms of what this instrument was designed for and what this instrument did. The cosmic ray instrument on Voyager, while it was at Jupiter, made a bunch of detections, which kind of makes sense. There's a massive magnetic field there. And it turned out that what they were seeing were particles from the eruptions on Io's volcano.
Yeah.
So his data looking at cosmic rays was, in this case, looking at massively accelerated particles from volcanoes.
Now, we didn't know about the
Uh,
giant magnetic field around Jupiter and the trapped radiation until we flew through it,
it
right?
it
Like,
was a so the Voyager mission, I think we really need to revisit it now that we're seeing more and more missions go out there so we can see. Yeah, everyone talks about the voyage through the solar system and the whirlwind, visit everything, but
mhm.
going back and focusing on just Jupiter versus Voyager, because we didn't know about the active volcanism. We didn't know about just what kind of a magnetic field was waiting for us.
Yeah.
geysers on Europa. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyways, so working with Ed Stone as a graduate student, he did this cosmic ray detector for Voyager, which is what helped us figure out, yes, they actually did eventually manage to leave and stay out of the solar system, which changes inside, which meant that they left the solar system more than once. He detected these particles from volcanoes. Then the balloon observations that he did once he got to Goddard, he was part of supernova 1987A, and I wish I'd had time to reach out to Phil Plait and ask Phil, did he ever work with this person? Because Phil's background was in gamma ray astronomy, and he was at Goddard during all of this as well. So they must have known each other. And
All right.
yes,
We're going to talk about this some more, but it's time for another break.
yes.
Okay. And we're back. Sorry.
It's okay. I am clearly enthusiastic. I have a problem.
Yeah.
So with the gamma ray work using balloons, again, he just kept wandering through science with his instrument. So there was supernova 1987A. There were blazars, which are galaxies with an active galactic nuclei that is sending jets out in an interesting way. He was looking at aluminum-26 decay, mapping regions of nucleosynthesis in the galactic plane. Positron annihilation. So he's now looking at how matter, antimatter are affecting each other. And it was balloon after balloon. And at a certain point, you need something better than a balloon. And this is where working with Compton plays such an important role. This was one of NASA's great observatories, and it was what allowed us to finally understand with certainty what we had hoped would be true, which was gamma ray bursts are evenly distributed around the entire sky. Now, he wasn't with Compton from the very beginning, but he was there for a lot of it. And working with Compton, he was there figuring out the distribution of these gamma ray bursts. And oh shoot, it isn't just that you have to pay attention to their distribution spatially. You also have to look at their distribution in time and finding out that there's multiple populations. One of his most cited papers is trying to come to terms with short gamma ray bursts and where are they in galaxies, trying to figure out what are they from where they are.
Right. And we talked quite a lot about that with the Swift telescope, and just how, thanks to Swift, we got ever closer to learning that they are colliding compact objects like neutron stars.
And so working as project scientist, there is the project scientist and there are project scientists on a mission. So from 91 to 2000, he was a project scientist on the mission. The project scientist, after Don Niffen stepped down, Don Niffen was responsible for its development. And so here he was, again, looking at the same stuff he was looking at with balloons. And from there, it becomes a question of, now we're finding all these gamma ray bursts. You have someone with an instrument-focused brain who thinks across multiple wavelengths, particles, multi-messenger astronomy, was done by him before the phrase even existed. And he was then part of the development of Swift and Fermi from basically day zero.
Right. Yeah. So let's talk. I mean, we talked a lot about the mission, but what role did he play in Swift?
He was the principal investigator of the Swift mission, which meant that he was part of ushering it through politically to make sure it would actually happen. So he was part of the team that went through, defined what instruments would be on board, defined what were the necessary functions of those. So what sensitivities do you need? What capabilities do you need? how does this thing need to be able to get from spotting something in gamma ray, zeroing in on X-ray, zeroing in optic and UV, so that ultimately you can find any optical afterglows that may be present, observe them as quickly as possible, so that we can finally figure out what these suckers
Mm.
are. So he's again going back to chasing what is necessary to understand these objects, doing multi-wavelength astronomy. And then
All
it
right, we're
took
gonna talk.
off. So,
Yes. All right, we're gonna talk about this some more, but it's time for another break. And we're back. So again, we put a lot of energy and time into the actual mission last week. So let's move on because while Swift was operating, Fermi, he worked on the Fermi telescope as well.
yes. And I just realized I misspoke. I meant to say he was the principal investigator for Swift, and I think I said project scientist. I meant to say principal investigator. He was
Well, he was
the
a project
person.
scientist for the Compton Gamma Ray Observatory.
Yes, but for Swift, he was the principal investigator. And I realized
Right.
I said the same words twice, and that was
Right,
wrong.
right. Yes. Yeah.
So
But yeah,
this,
so he worked on Fermi.
yes, so he worked on Fermi. He was the deputy project scientist there. So he was the number two person on defining how Fermi is going to do science. He was with it when it was originally just called GLAST. Um,
Yes.
and so here he's starting to get into magnetars, novae. The science he's part of is ever expanding. And while he's doing all of this is also when we're starting to focus more and more from the decadal survey point of view on what the heck is dark energy. Dark energy was discovered in the late 90s. And there is a lag between the we have discovered something. Now everyone make sure we didn't screw up. Okay, we did not screw up. Nobel Prizes have
Right.
been issued. Now, how do we figure out what this is? And there's lead time needed. And as we're getting into the 2010 decadal survey, there is this we have got to figure out dark energy aspect that came into play. And this is where W First, which is built out of a 2.4 meter telescope that was donated essentially to NASA from the Air Force, as one does.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
he,
again, I always sort of mention this story
yeah,
that the U.S. Reconnaissance Office donated to NASA two Hubble class mirrors
yeah,
because
yeah,
they didn't have any use for them because they didn't meet their requirements anymore.
yeah,
That they weren't good enough for the enormous reconnaissance telescopes that are pointing directly down at Earth that are
yeah,
bigger than the Hubble Space Telescope.
yeah. So
Yeah.
with the SNAP dark energy mission proposal that he was on with Saul Perlmutter, they were working on trying to figure out how do we figure out what this dark energy is. And that mission evolved into W First, which is going to be doing a lot more than just looking for dark energy. It's now the Nancy Grace Roman telescope. It's going to be looking at exoplanets. It's going to be uh, doing a lot of the looking at the nearer infrared and optical far red that lines up with what JWST is doing. So you have JWST out doing the longer wavelengths, then you have W First, which also has a smaller mirror, 2.4 versus many, many more. Um, and so he ended up being project scientist and chairing the science coordination group back in 2009 as they were defining this new observatory, pushing to try and get a chronograph on it or flying coordinated with it. And and he was part of defining all of this up through 2017, where he was diagnosed in 2016 with pancreatic
Mm,
cancer, one of the worst things a human being can
yes.
get. And at the end
It's
of the
almost
year, yeah,
always lethal.
yeah.
It acts really quickly. Yeah,
And
that
and
sucks.
yeah, so it sucked, but what's amazing looking back is in his, I work with so many people that keep publishing papers into their 70s, keep mentoring, like Parker, who we talked about last, into their 80s. And here he is. He passed away at 64. But look at this legacy from Voyager to balloons to Swift to Fermi to Nancy Grace Roman when it finally lifts off. And all the while, he was apparently the person that when there was a random conference in a random part of the world, he was off hiking. He was off. He had 3 ascents on the really difficult path up El Capitan at Yellowstone National Park. That's the
Wow.
thing that you see in Star Trek where
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So he was like a rock climber. That's amazing.
he was an amazing rock climber. He was someone who loved to be outdoors, and
Mm.
he didn't win every award, but he won a lot of awards. And I think in some ways the even better legacy is how many papers he had that have been cited by just about everything. And what got me was he has a paper with the horribly boring title, Confidence Limits for Small Numbers of Events in Astrophysical Data. This was a 1986 statistics paper that now has nearly 3,000 citations. So he was the one who's like, okay, someone has to figure out how to do these stats, and I am going to do this. Single author paper. Appeared in the Astrophysical Journal. And there's just all these other papers, like some that you would expect. The original paper on the Swift Gamma Ray Burst mission, of course, it has over 5,000 citations. But he also has one on the physical processes shaping gamma ray bursts that is, again, over 1,000 citations. And there's so many things that are just around 1,000 citations, 300, 500, 800 citations.
Yeah.
His work is a foundation of so much other work. His leadership allowed so much other work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's such a tricky job to be in this environment where you've got the requests from the scientists for the decadal survey. Those need to be turned into concrete missions, but you have to deal with the budgetary constraints, the changing administrations, and to see these missions through to completion and have them actually launch and be providing the science and actually have their ongoing maintenance budget. There is so much leadership that's required
And these
across that
weren't easy
process.
missions. Glassed,
No.
Fermi was glassed and got canceled. And I still have a strong memory of Phil Plait and I sitting next to each other. And Phil was associated with Glassed. And we were blogging our little brains out as the then administrator of NASA was talking during a NASA town hall and basically was like, all you astronomers belong at the children's table, because of all the work we had done canvassing and talking to Congress critters to get Glassed refunded and finished and launched. And so here we had someone who was at Goddard at a NASA center where what you can do is somewhat limited because government running a mission that then became so political.
Mm.
And yeah.
And being able to navigate that. Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Well, that was really interesting. And, it sounds like the perfect person to have a mission named after them. Thank you, Pamela.
And thank you, Fraser. And thank you to all the folks out there that support us through Patreon. We can't read all your names, but we are going to read some of the names for the $10 a month people. We get through the entire list once per month. This week, the names are Andrew Stevenson, Astro Bob, Astro Sets, Brenda, Brian Cagle, Brian Kelby, Bruce Amazine, Daniel Loosely, David, Disastrina, Don Mundus, Elliot Walker, Father Prax, Glenn McDavid, Greg Davis, Gregory Singleton, Hal McKinney, Jeff Collins, Jeff Wilson, Jeremy Kierwin, Joanne Mulvey, Joe Holstein, John Thays, Jonathan Poe, Jordan Turner, J.P. Sullivan, Klembathrow loves science. Christian Magersholt, Kinsaya Pinflenko, Larry Zolt, Lee Harborn, New Zealand, Mark Stephen Rasnak, Mike Heisey, Nala, Noah Albertson, Paul L. Hayden, Robbie the Dog with the Dot, Robert Cordova, Robert Plasma, Scone, Scott Bieber, Sean Matt, Stephen Veit, The Air Major, The Big Squish Squash, The Lonely Sand Person, Thomas Gazetta, Time Lord Iro, Tricor, Will Hamilton, and Zero Chill, and I'm now lightheaded from saying all of your names.
Wow.
I love how many
you really
there are.
eyeballed through it. That's awesome. Thanks, Pamela, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye-bye. And then they saved. I actually did get lightheaded from reading all those names so fast.
That's awesome. So I have two things to talk about. One is, this idea that the U.S. Reconnaissance Office gave NASA those two telescopes.
Yeah.
And so the idea for one of them was
the other one?
What happened to the other one?
Yeah.
And so NASA put out a call to scientists several years ago when they first got the option to come up with ideas for what they could do for the other one. And in the end, they decided that, because it's actually a very specialized kind of optics. Like it's not like it's just a perfect replica. Like, why not just build another Hubble? And it's just the way the optics work. It has various specific use cases. It was designed to watch people on the ground.
Yeah.
And so they were able to turn it into a wide field. But the idea that I liked the best was taking it to Mars and building having it fulfill its original role, but now it's looking at Mars as opposed to looking at Earth, right? And so I think that was a great idea. And then the other thing that I have is so I got invited to the Google Sci-Fu, which is yeah, like when I was doing the virtual star parties, I guess I got on the attention of the people behind Sci-Fu, and I got invited to go to Sci-Fu. And so this is it's like a summer camp for people who are influential in science.
Yeah.
And so they all show up at Google for a long weekend, and they put you up in a hotel and they bring you to Google, and you make these little unconference get-togethers where people pick various topics and they meet and chat. And then they have all of these get-togethers as well, casual, and it's very much like a camp. So they set up these pretend campfires. You can sit around and roast marshmallows and chat. And so I was sitting by the fire with Saul Perlmutter and Lee Smolin and a couple of other Nobel Prize winners. And they were just, as you do, as one does, and they were discussing the nature of time. They were trying to puzzle out what time is. And I was just a fly on the wall listening to these really intelligent people try to hammer out what they thought, just brainstorming, just shooting the shit about time, the nature of time. And it was really interesting. So, Saul Perlmutter helped, part of the people that discovered dark energy, helped lead the development of the telescope that became W1st. Yeah. And that was my experience with, and I also, what is it? Tyler Cowen. I don't know if you're familiar with Tyler Cowen.
No.
So he's an economist, but also he has a podcast called Conversations with Tyler, and really interesting guy. And so we sat on the bus together and we argued about what the future of drones were going to be. And he nailed it. Like, we are watching his prediction for what is going to happen with drones unfold with precision. And so far where we are right now is what he predicted, with consumer level drones being being deployed on the battlefield, that they're going to
Yeah.
push more and more autonomy to the drones, that and then what happens next, right? Is he then continued the thought process to what happens after that. And so I am waiting to see if what he predicted for what happens next also comes true. The gist being that the drones will become smaller and more lethal, and that we will eventually have to have drones that are fighting drones, and that you will
Yeah.
be surrounded. There will be drones all the time that will be everywhere. And some of the drones are trying to attack you, and some of the drones are trying to protect you. And there will just be drone fights going off nonstop. And then, really, whoever can afford more drones wins wars. Does that
Damn.
feel realistic?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it felt really reasonable to me at the time. And this is 14 years ago. No, 12 years ago, when I was sitting on the bus beside Tyler Cowen talking about this. And it'd be really interesting to sort of see what how the reality of drone warfare has matched his predictions. Because, in Ukraine and
Yeah.
Russia,
That's what we're seeing.
it is robots. We are seeing the robot wars already.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
drones on drone.
Yeah.
Right now, it's kind of drone on people,
Right.
people on drone.
Or slamming drones into each other.
Yeah, slamming drones into things
Hmm.
and slamming things into
Yeah.
drones. And eventually it'll be drones fighting drones. We're not quite there yet, where you can pack the intelligence that's required. Like, someone's got a missile and they fire it at a drone, or someone's got an anti-aircraft system they use to take down a drone. But
I
eventually it's going to be drones hunting drones. Of course it will, right?
and one of my favorite subgenres of videos is birds hunting drones.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, birds have a low opinion of drones.
It's true.
Gordon Dew asking, what was their conclusion, Fraser? I have no idea what their conclusion was. I didn't understand a word of it. So I was, I knew less about physics and science than I do now,
Yeah, I thought you
but
were initially saying you got invited to go back to Sci-Fu, which would have been amazing.
no,
Yeah, so this
no, I've
was
not
back
been.
in like
You don't get,
2011.
yeah, you don't get invited back.
Okay.
So
Okay.
generally you only get to do that once.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I would jump at the chance to go back to Sci-Fu, but no. Yeah. Oh, so were there any other questions?
Um, I'm being told podcasting is an automatable vocation, and I know you are right, and it makes me
Yeah.
mad.
Have you tried feeding stuff into
Yes, do not
Notebook LM?
like. Yes.
Yeah, so I fed it, like I was trying to understand Unruh radiation better.
Hmm.
And so I fed it um a a document, like a paper
Hmm.
by Unruh and others about Unruh radiation and its implications on black holes. And they gave me a 10-minute podcast about it, and it filled in a bunch of gaps in my knowledge. So it is 100%. It is, no, not 100%. It is 47% automatable.
So there's an interesting question in terms of just understanding what it means for NASA to do something over on YouTube. Brooke Malagetta, I'm sorry,
Mhm.
says they why couldn't NASA do the reusable rocket? Does it have to do with having having faster computers that SpaceX
Hmm.
uses for guidance? And so I think the important thing to remember is NASA doesn't make rockets.
Right.
NASA funds travel on other people's rockets through two different means. There was the cost plus fee budgeting, which is how Artemis is largely being paid for. Artemis is being
And
built by
Apollo and
ULA.
Gemini and
Yeah, all
everything,
of
the space
those.
shuttle, all
So
of
the
that. Yeah.
Mercury rockets weren't they were purchased from a federal contractor.
Yeah.
Space shuttle was a whole bunch of different parts from different companies, but yeah, Artemis is a United Launch Alliance rocket. Delta was Lockheed, I think. I may be completely wrong there. Not a rockets human.
Oh, yeah,
Who's
no, Delta's Boeing.
Delta's Boeing? Okay, so um, what we're seeing is Blue Origin, SpaceX, There's a third
Electron,
company.
Electron.
They're fully reusable,
Well, the Electron rocket, the rocket lab.
but they're
Yeah, they're
grabbing them
not
with
fully reusable.
helicopters.
Yes, they're partly reusable.
Right, partly reusable, and they're
Yeah,
not landing. They're getting caught in the most
right.
delightful kind of way.
Y- Yeah, I mean, you've got Sierra Space with
That's the
their
one I forgot. Thank
capsule.
you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what you're seeing is at a certain point around 2004, 2005, technology edged in on having the capability of doing it. And rockets developed since then have been getting closer and closer, with the weird exception of Ariane 6. And ULA actually builds some space shuttle technology. So
Hmm.
don't count it as new since 2005.
Yeah.
So new, completely new things developed since then have been becoming reusable because the technology allowed that jump in innovation. Um, and so it's not NASA, it's just a plain change in technology
Yeah.
and what has been developed since that change took place that wasn't tied to prior technology, the way Artemis
Yeah.
is
So
tied to shuttle.
for the vast history of the way NASA's worked is
Hmm.
that they've hired contractors to build the rockets to fulfill the requirements that they
Yeah.
have. NASA doesn't build these things.
Right.
You know, there's a few missions that NASA does build in-house, but mostly even the missions are outsourced, the big
Yeah.
ones. Um, and in 2007-ish, 2010, NASA put out a contract to commercial companies to say, we'll pay you to deliver cargo to the International Space Station. So
Yeah.
in the exact same way that you'll pay to have a package delivered to your house, in the same way that you'll pay to have the contents of your house moved to another location, right? You're not having someone design a truck to then move your house. You're just paying for the stuff to be delivered. And several
One,
companies proposed. One, there was Kistler Aerospace, and they went bankrupt.
yes.
And SpaceX was the one that survived with this is called the COPS contract. And then they continued on this commercial thing. And so they moved to cargo delivery to the space station. And um, you had the Cygnus capsule, and you have the Cargo Dragon.
Yeah.
And that's up to SpaceX. SpaceX has been the ones who've been saying, well, let's see if we can make the rocket reusable. And so they've been
Yeah.
developing a reusable rocket. And other companies, seeing the success of SpaceX, have surprisingly not put all of their energy into developing reusable rockets, except for Blue Origin.
And
Um,
one of the interesting
and
things that's
it's the
happening,
future.
yeah, one of the interesting things that's happening on the other side of that is, particularly under Bill Nelson since 2022, NASA has been moving to fixed fee contracts where it doesn't matter how much doing something costs your company. NASA is going to pay
Yes.
you the same amount no matter what.
Right.
Where the argument was in the past, they were paying for you to develop the technology. And they are now saying the technology is developed. We are going to pay you the same way we pay FedEx to deliver something.
Right.
So when you pay for a package to be shipped by FedEx, you don't have to pay for them to design and develop and build the truck. You only pay the transport fee.
Yeah.
And they're now saying that space is at that point, we're only paying the transport fee, which is leading to issues with the moon program, where there was a report not too long ago from the NASA Inspector General where they were like, hold up, this may not have been a good idea. And I'm
Mm.
waiting to see how all of that evolves, because different technologies are at very different stages in their evolution. And
Yeah.
I don't think we're ready for fully commercial space. Yeah.
No,
Leo,
but
fine,
but
but
some of them are definitely, yeah, Leo. So for
yeah.
example, now it costs NASA $60 million per seat to send people to the International Space
Hmm.
Station. And they don't have to pay for
Yeah.
the development of the rocket, and they don't have to pay for the development of the capsule. They just literally say, okay, here's the schedule. We want this person to go to the station. And SpaceX says, that'll be $60 million, please. And NASA pays up. And so their budgeting is now locked down. And if SpaceX realized that they need to invest more money, that's on them, not on NASA.
Yeah.
And this is crippling Boeing in one aspect, because they have a contract fixed price, what it's going to cost to fly on Starliner, and Starliner is just not doing as well as everyone had hoped. And Boeing is eating the cost because it is not a cost plus time contract. It is
Yeah.
a per seat contract. And so Boeing is having to recoup the price of what it's invested in this contract. And so
And
that's
that's
good
going
for
to happen.
NASA, that's good for taxpayers, and it's bad for Boeing.
And it's going to happen to Starship HLS because SpaceX already has most of the money on the Starship HLS contract.
Hmm.
And so development from here on out is on.
Is on them.
Yeah. And
Yep.
when you look at the financials for SpaceX, and I've only been able to find through 2023 published, the majority of their income is coming from Starlink, which means that to stay profitable, they have to focus on getting Starship to LEO and MEO for Starlink innovated. But for NASA, they have to get Starship HLS innovated, which requires on-orbit refueling, which is a radically different technology.
In a year.
Oh, yeah, they are totally.
Right.
Well, and not
Yeah.
only that, but they have ticked off the EPA in profound ways. And I'm waiting to see if they've triggered a full environmental assessment because there's some docs hanging out on the NOAA Eco website that looks like they're about to get hit with a full environmental
Yeah.
assessment inspection.
Yep. Yeah. All right. We reached the end of
Yeah.
our hour. So why don't we wrap things up? Thank you everyone for hanging out with us today. Thank you in advance to Rich. I hope we handled the pronunciation properly this time.
We have far less editing than normal this time.
Yeah,
We
there you
did
go.
good.
We did acceptable.
Yes.
All right. Thanks everyone. And we'll see you all next week.
Bye-bye, everyone.